Le Tour de France, a presentation by myself and Anne. So here's our table of contents. I'll be covering the history of the tour, the different stages on the tour, including how they're split up, the number of them, one that I find really cool and interesting in my opinion. I'm super excited to talk about that one. I will also be covering the different competitors, so who is competing in the tour, who has won recently, etc. The other information on our table of contents will of course be covered by Anne. The tour was established in 1903 by a man named Henri Desgranges, a cyclist and journalist from the magazine L'Auto. The magazine at the time wasn't selling so well, so they came up with a plan to sponsor this epic bicycle race across the entire country of France in order to increase sales. The original race had 6 stages and spanned across 2,428 kilometers. The competitors would start in the middle of the night and race until the afternoon and would get a couple days rest in between each stage. The original race only had 60 individual racers, but nonetheless, it was a large success for Lotto, who saw a massive increase in sales. Maurice Garin was the first winner of the Tour de France, completing it in 94 hours and 33 minutes. And after the first year in 1903, the race has continued every year since, aside from when the World Wars were happening. Over time, the race has evolved quite a lot. For instance, to combat cheating issues, the organizers increased the number of stages and made them shorter in length. That way, there was no cycling in the night and there was better supervision of the racers. As we can see here in the photo in the middle, there's now cars that were following the racers, and in the top photo, there's cycling in the daytime. The race started originally with 6 stages, and now there's 21 stages. Stage difficulty and variety was also quickly added to the race. Mountainous stages were added, which not only increased difficulty but also race length. For example, the longest race was in 1926, when it spanned 5,745 kilometers. Now that's rather extreme, and today the race is closer to 3,500 kilometers. Since the race's conception, a large part of it has been doping. It is ingrained in the race's history, as competitors from a long time ago would use substances like cocaine, chloroform, and alcohol to numb pain and to gain energy. Over time, doping has evolved, as now cyclists attempt to use new drugs like testosterone and erythropoietin to gain an advantage over their competitors. It has shaped the history of the race in a negative way. For example, people have been stripped of their titles as a result of cheating, like Lance Armstrong. Fun fact, for 7 straight years, there's officially no champion of the Tour de France because he won 7 years in a row and was stripped of his titles. And that's just one example of cheaters getting caught. There's many cheaters in the Tour de France spanning all across its history, and it's really left a dark mark on the race and the sport of cycling in general. Another important historical part of the event is the female version. The first female Tour de France was held in 1955 as a 5-stage, one-off event which was won by Marianne Martin. It was then continued in 1984, going until 2009 under various different titles. Then, starting in 2014, a 1 to 2 day race was created for women by the organizers of the Tour de France and ran until 2021. Then, starting in 2022, an actual version of a women's Tour de France was held. It started the week after the men's tour was over and featured 8 stages. It was a very big success and attracted a lot of support and viewership, and continued this year in 2023 and will also be held next year in 2024. Historically, there's been a lot of discrimination towards women cycling, and as a result, no real female Tour de France was created. However, now that one has been created and has been proven to be a success, it will hopefully mark the beginning of a new promising chapter in the Tour de France history.
The Tour de France is the most well-known bicycle race in the world and attracts the most visitors. The Tour is France's leading sporting event and means a lot to the French culture. It takes spectators throughout the entire country, causing more tourists to go to France. All World Tour teams participate with the world's best riders. The Tour takes 3 weeks with a total of 21 days of racing. After every racing day, the general classification, the GC, is calculated, including all riders and their total race time added up. The Tour de France is all about the jerseys, as you might have noticed if you ever watched a race day. The fastest rider, so with the lowest time in a GC, gets to wear the bleu jaune, the yellow jersey. This is the most important one because you receive this jersey if you win the Tour. There are also 3 other jerseys. The green one is for the best sprinter, the white one for the fastest rider under 25 years of age, and a polka dot jersey for the best cyclist in the mountains, also known as the King of the Mountains.
Currently, in the Tour de France, there are 21 different stages, and they change every year. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm only going to talk about the 2023 route. In 2023, the stages were split into 9 flat stages, 3 hilly stages, 7 mountain stages, which included 5 summit finishes, meaning that the cyclist had to climb to the top of the mountain to finish the stage, and 2 shorter individual time trials. The tour starts in different places each year, and not always in France. For instance, in 2023, the tour started in Bilbao, Spain. And in the past, the tour has started in numerous different countries, such as the Netherlands, Belgium, and England, to name a few. Throughout the tour, competitors are taken on a wild journey throughout France, visiting and cycling through many different places and landscapes. However, the race always ends in Paris, at the Champs-Élysées. So, as I mentioned, the tour has 21 unique stages, and it would take a really long time to go through each one in depth, time that we don't have. So, as a result, I'm just going to talk about my personal favorite stage from the 2023 tour, which was Stage 9. Stage 9 began in Saint-Léonard-de-Noblat, which is a commune in the middle west of France. It's an old, holy, and historical place with a very cool church that has a unique architectural style. It's somewhere I definitely recommend you visit if you're ever in France, as you'll get to take in a lot of interesting history and culture. The stage then goes past Lac de Vassivière, which is one of France's largest man-made lakes. If you wish to hike when you're in France, it's a great place to do that. It's also a great place to cycle, which is probably why it was featured in this year's tour. The stage then begins its elevation portion, making the cyclist climb steep roads, higher and higher up to the summit of Puy de Dôme, which is an ancient dormant volcano that is over 10,000 years old and is also an extremely popular tourist destination and somewhere I recommend you visit. You may not like cycling, but the tour covers so many different regions and landscapes in France, and it makes it very unique for that reason. And yeah, as I said, you may not like cycling, but you should honestly just watch the tour for the different places it covers alone. It's super interesting to see all the different cities and landscapes that it covers, and for that reason, it's a great event, and I really recommend you guys watch it in the future.
Riders use lightweighted bikes with gears to be able to go as fast as possible, as that is a way to winning the tour. These bikes also get completely personalized so you don't lose any necessary seconds in the races. Cyclists use three types of bikes: bikes for time trials, bikes for flat stages, and bikes for stages with lots of mountains. In the picture here, you see a bike for a time trial on the left and a bike for a flat stage on the right. You really see the difference between those two bikes. It also changes the entire posture of the rider. The International Cycling Union sets standards that all bikes have to adhere to, so it's fair for everyone and for every team. Back at home, I work for the winning team of this year and last year, Jumbo-Visma, and I know from experience that the team will bring around 60 bikes with them to the Tour. A team needs to be able to change bikes even during stages. This is needed when an incident happens or when, for example, the stage is very diverse, so it's more efficient to change bikes. Changing bikes takes a real team effort, as you can see in this picture. There are 4 members of the same team, all busy with this activity. Riders have to help and give their bike away to the rider in the team who has the highest place in the GC, because this person has the most chance of winning the Tour. The team will also bring its own mechanics, medical staff, cooks, and masseurs, adding up to around 50 people. They all help to achieve the best result possible. It's really about team effort and working together.
The Tour de France is comprised of 176 cyclists. There are 22 different teams, and each team has 8 cyclists. In the past 2 years, the same competitor, Danish cyclist Jonas Vingegaard, has won the Tour de France as a part of Team Jumbo-Visma. He's currently one of the most popular and best male cyclists in the world. As for the female Tour de France, in 2022, there were 24 teams comprised of 6 competitors each, making the total 144 cyclists. But in 2023, there were 22 teams comprised of 7 competitors each, making the total 154 cyclists. In 2022, the champion was Dutch cyclist Annemiek van Vleuten for Movistar team, and in 2023, the champion was Dutch cyclist Demi Vollering for Team SD Works. Alright. As for Canadian competitors, 2022 was a record year at the Tour de France. There were 4 Canadians participating in the event: Antoine Duchesne, Guillaume Boivin, Michael Woods, and Hugo Huel. Hugo Huel was the standout as he won the 178.5 kilometer 16th stage from Carcassonne to Foix, doing it in 4 hours, 23 minutes, and 47 seconds. He's the top video on the screen. This was the first Canadian stage win in 34 years, the last being a cyclist named Steve Bauer, who won the first stage of the 1988 Tour de France. This win was particularly special for Hugo Huel because he dedicated it to his brother, who was killed in an accident. And his brother used to do competitive cycling with him as well. So this was a big win not only for his team and for Canadian cycling, but for him and his family as well. This year in 2023, 3 Canadians took part in the Tour de France: Hugo Huel, Guillaume Boivin, and Michael Woods. They were all on the same team, Israel Premier Tech, and Michael Woods was the standout as he won the 182.5 kilometer 9th stage from Saint-Léonard de Noblat to Puy de Dôme, completing it in 4 hours, 19 minutes, and 41 seconds, which is the bottom video here. And if you remember, that was my personal favorite stage. So, fun fact about Michael Woods: he's from Toronto, specifically from East York, which is an area pretty close to my house back home. Another fun fact is the Puy de Dôme hadn't been featured in the Tour de France in 35 years. So for it to be back this year, and for it to be my favorite stage at the 2023 Tour, and for a Canadian to win it, is quite the coincidence, and in my opinion, made it pretty special. As for the female version of the Tour, 7 Canadian women participated this year. However, unfortunately, none were able to win a stage. Hopefully that can change next year though.
Up to 1930, the cycling teams were sponsored by manufacturers. By 1962, trade teams started arising. Nowadays, teams have all kinds of sponsors, from insurance companies to coffee brands. Riders are very much dependent on their entire team to win, and the teams are funded by these sponsors, so that means that the sponsors are very important for a team. The budget per team ranges from 15 to 73 million Canadian dollars. Here are some examples of team sponsors. Jumbo-Visma is the biggest grocery chain in the Netherlands. For example, Lidl is also a big grocery chain worldwide. These sponsors benefit from the exposure as their brand name is also the name of the cyclist team. This means that the media mentions this name a lot and the brand expects to make more sales or gain more popularity. You see in these pictures that when a rider wins a stage, they will point at the sponsor, or if they're doing an interview, you also see the name in the screen many times. This also means that the sponsor can change very easily, because if a sponsor does not see any added value anymore of being their sponsor, they will not want to do it again the year after. The fun fact is that riders only receive a couple of $1,000s for a stage win, and it's always shared within a team. The team wants to win, and it's not such an individualistic sport after all, which might be a surprise to some of you. Another thing that happens, which I think is quite funny, is when you win the tour, it's kind of an unwritten rule that you give your teammates an expensive watch to thank them for all the hard work. Yet again, it's all about the team and working together.